Ramadan Kareem and an advanced Eid Mubarak to one and all. I'm Pawan from Dubai World Trade Center, and a very warm welcome to the first of our series of webinars at Mania.virtual. The topic for today is Growth Reboot, Start Marketing Smart like Startups. As the world battles the crisis, there are rock stars amongst us who are making that difference in the world. From brands changing production lines to produce masks, gloves, and sanitizers, to high net worth individuals building state of the art hospitals within weeks. These digital trailblazing sessions, including webinars, interviews, virtual hangouts, and podcasts, are all a part of the Marketing Mania show taking place later this year at Dubai World Trade Center. The show will see thousands of visitors from the marketing, advertising, digital, creative communities from across the world discover, learn, celebrate, and shape the future of marketing together. I would now like to draw your attention to a few housekeeping rules which are mentioned in the chat room. Without any further delay, let me welcome today's moderator, Richie Mehta, the founder and CEO of School of Marketing and Learn It All. Richie launched a special e-learning program for digital marketers impacting 100,000 learners globally, which is aimed to create future CMOs. He is now sought after by major Fortune 500 companies. Over to you, Richie.
Thank you, Pavan. Ramadan Kareem, and a very warm welcome to you all. Look, it's certainly been quite a time over the last few months, and I'm sure you'll all agree that it's truly inconceivable that just a little while ago, we were looking forward to the arrival of a new decade, and then all of a sudden, just like that, the world just went into lockdown. And did I forget to mention the first time ever? Now, look, were we prepared? Did we see this coming? And look, even if the answer is no, it's now time to determine what we can learn to make sure we're better prepared to handle what lies next as a marketing and advertising community. So as Pavan mentioned, today's session is all about growth reboot. And looking at a particular segment of business that is high growth, high energy, high agility, and high innovation in order to understand what we can learn from them. So how do startups market themselves at this time to get ahead? But look, let's be honest here. There's a real significant consequence of getting this wrong. And I'm sure all of us at this point in time are looking to rewrite the rule book in order to determine the way that we navigate the situation. It's really time to wake up and do things differently. And there will be winners and losers. And I'm sorry to be blunt here, but I promise that this webinar is going to be all about how we decipher facts over sugar-coated messages. Really get to the heart of the issues and uncover how some superstar startups are solving for them. Now, before we get into it, just for a little bit of context, I want to share some interesting data with you, which you'll see on your slide now. So you can see that brands have actually suffered quite significantly over this time. And in fact, over the last few months, they've lost value to the tune of double the GDP of the UAE. We've seen huge job losses across our industry, and many organizations are actually slashing marketing budgets at this time. Now, through this, Harvard Business School conducted a study and found that only 9% of cases do firms actually come out of a recession stronger than when they went in. Now, for us as a marketing community, a constant debate rages on at this time, whether we should be cutting budgets right now or in fact increasing them. Well, look, as for Harvard, those that cut budgets had the lowest probability of pulling ahead of the competition when times got better. Now, those that decided to invest and spend more during these times did do that little bit better. However, the companies that did the best were the ones that were able to balance and deploy both offensive and defensive strategies at the same time, being able to maximize operational efficiencies whilst also being able to invest for the future. Now, these are the 9% of companies. Now, here today, I've got some great news in that our panelists are certainly fit into this bill. They certainly fit into the 9% and have deployed some amazing strategies, not only to survive right now, but also to come out stronger at the other end. So let me introduce the panelists here to you. First up, we have a man who launched a virtual platform for entertainment in April, getting over 10,000 virtual visitors on its launch. Welcome Sudhir Sayal, CEO of Middle East for Book My Show.
Thanks, Ruchi. Pleasure to be here.
Next up, we have a Wonder Woman who converted a 2,000 square meter office into a community kitchen that showed one of the highest levels of social media penetrations in the UK. An absolute pleasure to have Christina Covello, Head of Strategic Growth at Fooditude UK.
Hi.
And another woman who transformed a loss-making agency into a profitable venture. We've got Mimi Micklin, Regional MD and Chief Creative Officer of RAP UAE. Great to have you with us, Mimi. Hello. Next up, we've got a man who has featured multiple times in Event Magazine's top 100 most influential people in the industry for his experiential marketing skills. Great to see you here, David Balfour, co-founder of Light Blue and Vice Chairman of Tribe Global.
Hi, how you doing?
Great to see you here, David. And finally, we got one of the most sought after men by Emirati businessmen and women to digitally transform themselves. Wonderful to see you here, Paul Lalovich, founder of Agile Dynamics in the UAE.
Hello, everybody. Greetings from Abu Dhabi.
So guys, we want to make the session as interactive as possible. So we've got a poll running through the entire session. So before we move on to the panel, I just want to get you guys to answer a question. So on your screens now, you should have the first poll come up, which is, what department are you from? Fastest finger first, guys. And let's see some results. Okay, it seems like we've got more than half the room here from the marketing function. Great to have all you guys here, but a real mix from advertising, a few from PR and comms. And I would love to hear in the chat about where the others are from as well. So great, lovely to have you all here. Now, without further ado, I want to move on to our panel and ask the first question. So this first one goes out to Sudhir. Sudhir, how has COVID-19 directly impacted your business, both financially and for customers? Over to you.
Interesting question, Richie. As you can imagine, our business's mandate pre-COVID was out-of-home entertainment. And post-COVID, the singular message across the world has been stay at home. So you can imagine how we've been impacted. Our revenues have come down to almost zero. International tours have been cancelled across the world. Consumers are not in any state of mind to come out for concerts. It's not even allowed by governments. And some of our revenue also comes from sponsors, and that's also been completely erased. So it's been extremely hard for us, but often in these tough times, you have to innovate and find bright sparks and find ways to pivot and to continue remaining meaningful.
And Sudhir, I'm going to come back on to you a bit later on to talk about how you were able to pivot at this time. So thank you for that initial response. Christina, what's happened to you at Fooditude?
Yeah, so Fooditude is a contract caterer, and we deliver lunch to offices in London. And most of our clients are American tech firms who caught on to the work from home thing really early on. So by mid-March, we had 0 clients, and about a month later, 0 revenue, which is pretty scary. All of our staff was also furloughed, so that made it difficult to sort of pivot to anything revenue generating. So we closed down for about a week, we regrouped, and then we realized we had some great resources. So we have a 20,000 square foot kitchen. We have a bunch of furloughed staff who were happy to volunteer. We had connections with the community. So we ended up opening up a community kitchen, and we're serving those vulnerable and isolating in our communities. So far, we've served about 13,000 meals. So it's been amazing. It's been great for morale. It's been great to keep the machines going, and it's been a great story to shout about publicly. So,
so Christina, that sounds amazing. And I'm going to come on to a big question around, well, it's great for publicity, but not so great for cash. So I'm teeing that one up for you a bit later on. So let's understand how you were able to solve that problem. Thank you for that initial response there, Christina. Mimi, over to you on the agency side.
Yeah, I think for us, our biggest challenge in agencies is how we do pipeline planning, right? So obviously our revenue depends on our clients' revenue, and depending on the category and the industry that they're in, that's been, very up and down over this time. So yeah, I think on the one hand, the outlook is difficult. Cash flow is difficult to plan for when you don't know what's going to happen in the months ahead. But on the other side of that, it's allowed us, I think Christina just used the word pivot, to pivot very quickly and to look at how you elevate creativity and keep morale and motivation high in a slightly different environment. So there's been some good with the bad.
Oh, I can feel your pain there, Mimi, and I'm sure we'll come on to how you are thinking about pivoting the agency model sort of moving forward. So thank you for that response. David, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, Sudhir, I think Mimi pretty much wrapped it up in terms from a live experience perspective and an agency perspective. You know, like Blue, we're an experiential agency at heart. So we live and thrive on live experiences. So, you know, currently at the moment, what we're trying to ensure is that we're not panicking, we're not rushing into market with something that might not be true to us. So it's allowed us to pause, sit back, and then go and start educating our clients on what we're good at. And I think that's possibly the main thing that the team have delivered.
Sounds like to me, David, that you're on the defensive to then suddenly go back on the offensive when the time's right. Seems
Absolutely,
really like a really interesting place of doing it. Thank you for that, David. And Paul, what's your thoughts?
Well, Agile Dynamics is a business architecture firm. So we help other organizations to pivot and transform in order to manage the crisis. So this is quite a busy season for us. We see digital marketing as a tip of the spear that's going to help businesses survive and thrive this crisis. And we're here to support them. A lot has to do with education and getting the skill set required to adjust to a new norm is going to be critical. Essentially, those that will actually benefit from the crisis, they'll accelerate the skills gap closure, and they will manage their digital transformation as effectively.
Thank you, Paul, for that. That sounds super. And certainly when you're coming on to the skills of the future, I think that's going to be a very pertinent topic as we move through this webinar. But guys, a range of common themes coming out there, from great revenues to literally almost nothing, moving from staying at home sort of scenarios and how you pivot across. A lot of ambiguity around pipeline as well. But then I guess Paul giving us some hope and some direction of where the future is going to go. So that's great. Thank you for those initial comments there, guys. I want to go back to our participants and ask the next poll question here. So can we have the next poll question come up, please? Great. So what percentage of your marketing and advertising budgets have been cut for 2020? And we're just waiting in for all your responses. Let's see what people think. Seems like a very pertinent question at the time. And the results are, wow. Okay, so it seems like quite a staggering that the vast majority of people have found that around and over 20% of budgets have been cut at this time. And very interesting, and I'm sure that that's causing a lot of people some significant grief at this moment. So let's move on back to the panelists and think about how we reflect on cutting budgets at the moment, whether it's in your own business or actually more in the landscape, and think about how you're currently tackling this situation from your perspectives. Sudhir, back over to you at Book My Show.
Sure. So the moment this happened, we were wondering, how does one tackle the situation? We realized that consumers are still looking to get engaged. So we spoke to some of the artists in India and artists in UAE, and we launched something called Live from HQ, which was live streamed concerts going straight into people's homes using Instagram, Facebook initially, and then moving to actually us launching our own platform. And phase one saw us doing this with 5 of India's biggest artists. We then launched a performing arts edition, a comedy edition, and a music edition. We had 10,000 viewers per show in our first week. And then after that, for the next 3 weeks, we've had over 60,000 viewers. And that was phase one. Phase two actually is we actually ticketing events. So we've launched something called Ha Ha Habibi, the first virtual comedy IP, where events are actually being ticketed and we're actually seeing sales. Plus sponsors are looking to get engaged to be a part of it. So there are some lights at the end of the tunnel if you look hard enough, is what we are seeing.
So Sudhir, let me ask you a hard-hitting question there. You mentioned that at this time that your revenues almost shrank to the brink. How were you able to pivot on a budget?
Sure, great question. So firstly, negotiate. So one of the big costs in our business is the artist fee, right? But given given the current environment, we were able to renegotiate our structures with artists to make structures revenue share oriented as opposed to fixed fee oriented. So that was one big way of removing cost. Number two was actually work a lot with partners on barter arrangements for marketing as opposed to working on a fixed fee. Number three, bank on PR and organic marketing even more, which is what we've done. And we've actually seen that digital marketing is slightly cheaper at this point of time. If everybody else is backing off, PR is also gives you more bang for your buck because no one else is talking. So there are opportunities if you actually invest in marketing. You're getting more value at this point.
So Sudhir, I think what you're saying here is in order to pivot at this point in time, move your fixed costs into variable costs. It feels like there's a real moment in time where people are up for doing more collaborations in that sense and taking on more risk across the ecosystem.
Absolutely. And we've been surprised by how open partners have been to this.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sudhir. I want to go and move on to Christina. Christina, picking up with something that Sudhir actually said around organic reach and social. I know this is something that you've done tremendously well over the last couple of weeks. So tell us a little bit about that and how you're tackling the situation.
Sure. So our closest competitors, they've actually gone quite silent, and we made the conscious decision that we didn't want to go dark. So we've been actually more prolific than ever on social media. And we've been posting things either about our community kitchen, so very purpose-led messaging and doing fundraising through our GoFundMe page, or really useful things like recipes and quick lunches and things like that. So we've been keeping it either purposeful or useful the whole time.
Christina, can I ask you, you've had some major celebrities that have actually jumped on and helped you to leverage what you're doing at this time. How did you get them on board? What did you have to do? And what advice can you share for others, maybe looking to follow a similar influencer strategy?
Yeah, so really, it was probably luck more than anything, and offline connections, and just finding out who people know and getting them to use their connections for us to get the news about our GoFundMe page out there. But it's been super fun to interact with people like Jamie Oliver and Keith Lemon and Jarvis Cocker. Yeah. So
you know, it's interesting because there's a Marketing Week study that was done that was found that actually marketers and business people more generally right now are more empathetic. And I think this is a key point, and people are actually open to actually have these conversations where perhaps a few months ago they wouldn't. So yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Christina.
You're welcome.
Yep. Maybe let me come on to you in the agency landscape. I think this is where perhaps some of the budget cuts would be most acutely felt. How are you tackling this at the moment?
Look, I think you can't tackle it in our industry. You just have to go with it, right? There is no way to tackle it. If the clients don't want to spend money, there is no money to be spent. So I think for us, the focus has been on value rather than revenue. And how we can offer value to our clients. I mean, I think if ever there's a time for goodwill, it's now, right? So we're all in this together. Nobody planned for this. Nobody would want this to happen. And what we do all have is our EQ and our IQ, right? So in the agency landscape, that's what we sell. We sell ourselves. We sell our minds and our creativity and our people. So for us, it's really been a shift to how can we help? Obviously both our own teams if they need help, but I guess more importantly our clients. So how can we help? I really believe that sort of what goes around comes around, and if there was ever a time for generosity and as I said, a shift of value, it's probably now. And I think having that focus on the more positive side rather than worrying about the numbers every day all day has worked for us.
Mimi, in a couple of sentences, can you give me an example of say an innovation that you've made over the last couple of months with the clients? You don't need to name them or anything, but just something that you've done differently.
Yeah, I think the most obvious one is moving clients into social. That's been a really easy move for us. Has been quite a scary move for some of the clients, but we've got two really big global clients who just weren't really doing it. Speed has been of the essence, and there they are now in the social world.
That sounds great, Mimi. Thank you very much for that. And from social, going back into experiential with David. David, how are you tackling this problem?
I think, we took a look at the importance of people first from an agency perspective. I think that's how we are as an agency. Culture is very much at the heart of everything that we do. For us, you can't focus on what you can't control. So let's focus on what we can control. And I think that's been a real important element for us being able to move forward. We've delivered some excellent webinars on new age storytelling where we talk about virtual, mixed reality. And we're now educating our clients even more so than we were previously, because it's the conversation at hand. So for us, it's really been ensuring that the team are settled. We have a pathway to go, and trying to bring our clients on that journey.
David, are your clients biting at this point in time, or are they just sort of having a bit of a wait and see position?
I think in April it was pause. No one was happening. No one was talking. It was very much let's just wait and see what happens this month. This month now, based on the back of a lot of the webinars we've created on New Age storytelling specifically, it's really started. The conversation is flowing. Brands are a lot more open into engaging on briefs. So even this week, we've received about 8 different briefs that we're working on. We're pitching quite a lot at the moment. But more importantly, we're actually having great conversations with the clients. So they're very much part of the building of the brief.
Are you seeing that people are pitching on Zoom these days? Is that kind of pitch back to normality, but face-to-face to virtual?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Zoom is our new norm. We talk about our creative hubs now, our bedrooms, our kitchens, our bathrooms. It really is, as Ray demonstrated earlier, that is our creative hubs now. This is where we think.
I love that. I'm going to come back to that point around creativity and how we foster that in the industry moving forward. But Paul, over to you. What are your thoughts on how you're tackling the situation at the moment?
Just listening to panelists, I think we're hitting the nail right on the head. Minnie made a really great point about moving from price to value. That's going to be essential. I don't think that conversations around the price are going to do any good either to clients or to service providers. And as David suggested, there has to be a lot of education. So just, few points. We typically spend a lot of time with our clients, working with them on the cost optimization. So basically, you need to understand that not all costs are equal. You need to prioritize. You need to know where to cut, and you need to know how to cut. So cutting your marketing budgets is definitely not going to do you much good.
What are some of the key things, or the top things that you would cut in a budget at this point in time?
So essentially what's happening, organizations have a blanket blockbuster approach. They get this magic number, 20%, 15%, 30%, and they just go across the board and they leave it to their operations to prioritize on the lower level of the organization. Typically, this is not yielding best results. This decision has to be architected at the top of the organization because it has to do a lot with how the organization is going to pivot. How's your business operating model going to change? So you need to make those decisions in order to figure out where you're going to put the smart money. And clearly, marketing having a huge impact on your top line is not one of those areas that you should cut. Just keep in mind that marketing internally is going to become more and more pivotal for the organizations. As you reshape your organization, you need to fight for the hearts and souls of your employees in order to keep your organization intact, because the top talent lives first. So that's the first part. Second part, you need to reassure your suppliers as well as your customers, and that requires a great deal of marketing savvy and creativity. So if you can do that on a budget without money and with the 20% cuts, I'm in the lineup to hear how you're going to do it. So the way I see it, the marketing budget should actually go up in a time of crisis, because it has to do with the right communication at multiple levels. Does that make sense, guys? I don't know. This is at least our point of view.
Hey, look, it certainly makes perfect sense to me, particularly around being able to be savvy and frugal with your marketing budget and actually extending the reach. Mimi, do you have a point around this and an opinion and thought around how you use budgets effectively at this point in time, given your agency background?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's the same argument, right? I always remember back in 2008, when we went through the global recession, how many presentations the agency I was in at the time presented around, the psychology of cutting budgets in this time. It never works. Because the reality is, if you go dark and quiet now when your consumers need you, because they do need us, all of them need us now, probably more than ever. The people that outshout you, which is sort of what Christina was mentioning earlier, that her competition was going quiet and she made the decision to not be quiet. It makes more sense because we're all humans, right? And when you actually just look at the psychology of human beings, when you go through a tough time, the people that were there with you, whether that's a brand or your employer or your family, are going to be the ones that made a difference and that you remember. So yeah, I'm not going to go into the economic modeling of it, but I think from an emotional connection point of view, never has there been a time to speak.
Makes perfect sense. And I think people are looking for reassurance at this time. It's certainly what I found within our business as well, that people are more willing and want to get reassured. Let's move on to the third poll now, guys. So back to the participants. So what is your top priority now? Fastest finger first. We really want to hear what you have to see, your first thought answers. So let's submit and see what you think. And the reveal, interestingly, all about customer retention. So 34% of people think that customer retention is the most important priority at this point in time. I suspect, given the flock to safety, that's required, but also quite a significant part of people looking to nurture new leads at this point in time as well. So coming on to a little bit about the future, and we talked a bit about pivoting in the opening remarks, but I want to kind of focus down on this sort of pivoting situation at the moment. So Sudhir, back to you, and to give us your view on how you're evolving your business as you see some of these future trends. So what sort of trends are you focusing in on, and how are you evolving your business to tackle them?
Sure, great. So we spoke about ticketed events. I think virtual reality, augmented reality is a trend and is a technology that will get more focus. And we're already seeing that in different parts of the world with Oculus becoming more popular, with people looking at ways to consume experiences without getting out of their home. So I think that's one trend which we're investing in, and we are with augmented reality, we're evaluating how we can create entertainment experiences for people within their homes, right? So I think that's one. The second is within socially distanced environments, and there's this feeling of community that we all in this together. You mentioned the word empathy, and I think those 2 points, community and empathy, are very important, right? So firstly, how do you create entertainment experiences with keeping in mind social distancing, keeping in mind safety, and some experiments with drive-in cinemas. We are going to be seeing pop-up cinemas come out. In the West, there have been many such examples, and at the right price point and with a methodology that's repeatable, that is still something people want to come out and experience. We are noticing that consumers are still brave. Consumers still want to come out. People are as afraid as people are. People are extremely bored in their homes at this point. I was in Dubai Mall, for instance, for the weekend, and there were people there, not only in Carrefour, there were people there across all the stores purchasing. So with enough good news, we believe in the optimism of people and the optimism of humanity that everybody to get out. And we've noticed that in China with Disneyland being selling out when it's opened. We've noticed that with sales of items on e-commerce stores. So there's enough optimism for us to bank on as we believe in consumers being brave.
So you're saying that things will somewhat resume back, although a potential hybrid between sort of in-house entertainment and those consumers reverting back to a more bit of normality. I want to come on to our experiential expert, David, to give us his view on that thought. David, where do you see the trends going, and do you see them converse or aligned with what Sudhir said?
No, I believe what Sudhir said is very relevant. I think there will be a certain case of revenge travel or revenge purchase. People are dying to go out there. The world right now is actually a beautiful place. You know, if you look at Venice right now, there's dolphins in the canals. You will never see this again. So the opportunity to travel, to see clear waters and blue skies and everything that we're seeing at the moment, that's the big opportunity. So I think there will be an increase in travel, and I think it will probably be less likely that it will be family travel. It will be couple travels and single travelers that will be moving along. We're seeing right now a massive trend into digital health and wellness as well. So products like Fitbit will again start moving forward, because we're on it right now with everything. Even our company, we're doing 5,000 walks a day for charity. So this is something that will 100% start progressing much more so. And I think consumers will become a lot more environmentally cautious. So they'll start looking at brands that are and have supported, for example, the NHS. Let's say Barber, who produced PPE equipment. People will support the brands that have supported the NHS and other brands and other places like that.
Thank you very much, David. That sounds great, and I am reassured by your optimism about the coming back on travel. I feel that sounds great in times to come, given we've all been locked down for the last couple of months. Christina, you're sitting at the coalface of a very interesting situation in London. Where do you see this going at the moment, and how do you see your business evolving?
Yeah, so when I sort of got the question about trends, I had a bit of a chuckle, because I think uncertainty is the trend. Things are so changeable right now. The trend for working from home will definitely affect us. Of course, we deliver food to offices. So I think one of the challenges for us is, how do we reach people in their homes, perhaps? Our business is food, but what we're actually selling is a sort of sense of togetherness and social bonding over lunch. And sort of happiness in the workplace. So it's about how we can find those people at home and sort of do the same thing.
So in a nutshell, what's your thought process to think about how you're going to pivot from, say, an office-based environment to a wider sort of distribution network? What are some of the key things that are going through your mind that could be useful for others at this point?
Yeah, so I don't know if we're going to be delivering food to homes. I think our product line will definitely have to diversify. I think, packaged foods, and we used to do only buffets, so things like that won't be possible anymore. I'm quite interested in figuring out an app that could help people come together over lunch at home, so a virtual team sort of thing. But I think we'll definitely, traditionally, we've done a lot offline, and we definitely need to get more technologically savvy and get online and find people.
Sounds good. There's a real common theme there around technology and digital playing a much more important role moving forward. So thank you, Christina. Mimi, what's your thoughts?
What on trends post this time?
Indeed. Besides the ambiguity.
Besides the ambiguity, I think, the word empathy has come up a couple of times already this afternoon. And I think probably for me, and certainly what I spend my time studying, is how people connect and the role of empathy. And that for me is not going to be a trend. It's already a trend. The need for people to feel connected and to share, like Christina was just saying, whether that's over a meal, and to find a way to create new cohesion is just, really, really critical. And I think from a leadership point of view, never has there been a time when we've had to do that more than now. So the role of empathy in the workplace, the role of just leaders that understand their teams and are flexible with their teams and are open to a new way, because what the lockdown has taught us, if nothing else, is that when you slow down, when you have more time, you can see things differently. And we spend so much of our time just on the treadmill of life, flying through every day, that I think, lots of very senior leaders have been able to take a new perspective in this time and just look at how they might do things differently. So yeah, a trend towards greater connectedness and more need for connectivity between teams and people and humans in general, I think is definitely already rolling.
Mimi, with your theme around empathy, have you seen that sort of being encouraged, or has that actually been enhanced or hindered by the way that we're currently working, say lockdown, Zoom fatigue, things like that? What's been your experience of it?
Look, I think, of course, there are always pros and cons to everything. And like you said, Zoom fatigue is one of them. Some days you just can't handle any more screen time. But in a sort of more generalized approach, I think, what's happened in this time is that we've become closer and more human and more transparent than ever before, right? Because right now you can see a panel and you can see into all their houses, except for Paul, who's got a very clever background on. But the rest of us, you can see our homes, you get a glimpse into our lives. People have met their colleagues, partners and children and pets, and seen their kitchens and their washing. So definitely there has been enhanced connectivity into personal life, and that blurry line between what we perhaps used to call work-life balance has changed entirely. So it'll be very interesting to see how that changes and merges now. But I think when you look at the millennials, the chances are they will have changed their mind as to how they see that balance between the two and what going back to 9 hours in the office 5 days a week means for them.
I think we're certainly on the cusp of a significant shift in that regard. I can totally relate to that. And in fact, I just had a meeting the other day, new client, when in effect, he had his daughter sitting on his lap, and that's how I got introduced. And it was just like amazing. I mean, this is just great. It just kind of really cuts all the formality out, which I thought was just fantastic. So I completely concur with you there. Paul, what's your take on some of the trends and how you're going to evolve?
Well, you know what I say, when you're in the eye of the storm, it's very difficult to find bearings and to understand how big is the storm, how bad is the storm. And I think most of the humanity is currently in that situation. I think we'll need some temporal distance as well as venture point to really assess the situation. The way we're looking at it, this is definitely one of those black swan events. When it comes to the business planning, developing scenarios is really critical. So I think smart money is going to be on organizations that are really strategic. They understand they need to plan against multiple futures. So I can tell you one thing for sure, it's not going to be like yesterday. We're not going to go back to a traditional, environment that we're used to. It's going to be a brand new world. Is this going to be a better world? I guess it's up to us, to create it. So this is as much of a crisis as much as of an opportunity. And I know it sounds as a cliche, but it's a huge opportunity.
You talked about this event as being a black swan event, and then you talked about future plans and being able to build out scenarios. How do those two come together?
Well, essentially, we do a lot of work as a business architects. We traditionally support organizations to help them execute their strategy. And first thing that we tell them, do not plan against a single future. There are multiple trajectories that might be at play. So you need to have a really strong point of view of what are the different scenarios that you're going to be planning for. And you need to monitor maturation of those scenarios and adjust accordingly. So you can't come back and say like, well, we didn't really expect this. You always have to be ready for those once in 100 years events and keep them in the back pocket and have your business continuity plans ready. It sounds paranoid, but it's a reality.
Well, not at all. And I think there's a relevant point here. And I want to contrast two retail organizations in the UK, one being Primark versus Tesco. Primark, on the one hand, went from a $650 million a month revenue generating giant to literally zero because they weren't prepared for what was to come next. And more so, they saw the e-commerce trend, they just didn't capitalize on it. So that's one thing. And then you think about Tesco with home deliveries, they actually were able to increase their home deliveries almost like tenfold within a couple of weeks. They had home deliveries before, but they had the contingency planning in case something had to have exponential scale and growth. So I think there's something in what you're there saying, Paul. That's great. Thank you very much. Guys, I need to move on to the next poll now. So can we sound out the next poll, poll 4? Okay, so what's the most important aspect that you are focusing on now in your campaigns? Maybe a relevant word there on option 1 for you.
All for me.
Absolutely. Not to mention there, David, another one on option 3 for you, perhaps. Let's have a look what the other people here think. Well, a very close call between empathy messaging and being direct and being transparent. I think that's so perhaps the call of the day. I think transparency is absolutely key at this point in time. Great, thank you very much for that poll there. Let's move on again back to our panelists for question 4. So what advice would you give organizations on how to work like a startup to survive during this period and beyond? Sudhir, what's your thoughts?
So I think we've seen in the UAE market and across the world, companies have reacted differently. So some companies have managed to retain a lot of their workforce, but their costs have increased. Some companies have completely reduced their workforce by almost 90-95%. We've seen that in our sector as well. I think the real answer is you have to be somewhere in between. If you have to cut some costs, by all means, go ahead, cut costs. But there needs to be enough of a core team to be able to capitalize on opportunities. And we are seeing numerous opportunities because your competitors out there who are not in the market anymore, who are retrenching a lot of people, guess what? You have the opportunity to eat their lunch, right? And you are suddenly, just by virtue of being there, you have the opportunity to go in front of them. I mean, Woody Allen once famously said that 90% of life is turning up. So, I mean, if you can't turn up if you don't have a team. So I think people have to realize this, and I think the biggest mistake people are making is being too pessimistic, because you still need enough of a team to be able to capitalize on opportunities while being flexible.
Thank you very much for that, Sudhir. That's great. Christina, what's your thoughts on what advice would you give to help people survive and thrive at this time?
Well, I think it all depends on your goals. So Fooditude has always been happy with kind of slow and steady growth. I would say get creative, obviously is a no-brainer. Sounds cliche. And remember that not everything has to be online. There's a lot of great offline stuff you could be doing. Spend wisely, but do spend, and be genuine in what you're doing.
That sounds great. Is there a case for exponential growth at this time as opposed to slow and steady? Can there be some areas where that happens?
I think it all depends on your business. Depends on, what you're selling, what you're doing, and what you want to get out of it. So sure, depending on who you are.
Fingers crossed for some, especially if you're Zoom. Mimi, what's your thoughts?
Look, the business I run is a big global brand, but fundamentally we are a startup here when you look at how we work. And I think one of our biggest sort of differentiators or focus areas is just being egoless. And I think we don't talk about that enough, because so often it is ego that gets in the way of all of these facets that my colleagues on the Zoom are talking about, flexibility, nimbleness, pivoting, changing, being open. All of those facets are completely derailed by people that just say, this is the way I've always done it, this is the way I do it, this is the way I want to do it, and without an openness to change. So from my experience, I think that's been a massive learning, but also a big driver for us. And when I compare us to some of the bigger agencies out there who have lots of hierarchical and very established structures, that lack of ego and that just openness to try, to fail, to give it a go, and to let other people in the team do things that they're good at that maybe they didn't do before, is really, really important.
I love that thinking, actually, and I think it's led a lot of organizations today to do things that they probably could never have thought before. I mean, HSBC is a great example where within a matter of weeks they literally had call centers all working from home, and it was something that pre-pandemic they never would have thought about. So I think there's some really rich takeaways from there about agility and flexibility. Egoless is a lovely term to be thinking about too. So thank you for that, Mimi.
You're welcome.
David, what's your thinking on this?
I don't think we can look much past the importance of people. I think people within the agency drive its culture, drive the type of brands you want to work with. I think you've got to be ready to fail, and be ready to fail many times before you can restart and kind of reboot your strategy. Within the importance of people is being able to retool for the future. Innovation is no longer an option. So it's how we put customer experience at the heart of everything. It's making, especially at the moment, it's making it frictionless. So that we're eliminating these levels of engagement. So consumers, home, live events, wherever it may be, it's in the now.
David, you talk about being ready to fail. How do people pick up and get back on the wheel, as it were, when in these uncertain times? What advice would you give them?
I think this happened in 07, 08, where there was a bit of a cleanse in the market. I think now it's really this will make you better. This will make you stronger. This will show us what you're made out of. And people who do get stronger with this, ultimately they will succeed in the future because they're brave. They're taking a chance. Lots of agencies back in the day started out in 07, 08, and I think the same thing will happen nowadays.
That's great there, David. So be brave, I think, is a great theme coming out from that. Paul, what's your thoughts?
Trust and let it go. You know what I say? Engagement is when employees do the right thing when nobody's watching. So I think more and more organizations are really going to recognize who are the high performers and which employee segments do not really meet the expectations. So ultimately, I think smart organizations will really empower their employees to get the most out of them, and they will trust them, especially in this new environment where there is a lot of work done from home. The trust level has to kick in. And the other thing of this magic potion is going to be the leadership, of course. I think this is a great opportunity for leaders, you know, to walk the walk rather than just talk the talk. So now they got to come from their ivory towers among the employees and really encourage them to work together towards the common goal. So leadership and trust.
Trust, empowerment, leadership. Great. Thank you very much there, Paul. That's really good. Okay, coming on to our fifth and final poll, let's have a look at the next question. So the CMO toolkit for 2021, which is a must-have. So dear Paul, I can see a couple of answers that may suit you guys. Okay, and let's see some of the responses. Wow, so it seems like virtual engagement platforms, I guess, what we're on right now is perhaps one of the big things that we'll see in the future. That's really interesting. David, do you have a thought on this and how that's going to evolve, particularly from an experiential point of view?
I think not even from an experiential perspective. I think from a business perspective, the need to fly to Geneva, Munich, London, I think that will go out the window. You know, now you can have these conferences, you can have senior high-level meetings by Zoom or Microsoft Teams. You know, I think the whole environment of, I know CFOs, I know my CFO is loving the fact that I'm not traveling. So I'm saving a huge amount of money for the company. And I think, you know, I mean, we just had an example with Ray doing his act live from New York at 5 in the morning. So that's a great example of, you know, the new ways of working. It will change. You know, it's when we get further down the line when we have, or we're meant to have a live experience and, you know, engage with football stadiums or cricket stadiums. That's going to be the tough one, because there's a burning desire to be at these live events. You can't change a virtual experience. The feeling that you get at being at Wembley, as an example, you know, that's human touch, that's desire. You can't change that.
David, thank you very much for that response, and I can totally relate to that. I want to move on to some questions from some of the participants and panelists at the moment. So, in fact, first of all, thank you very much for so many questions that have come in. I'm going to try and get through as many as I can in the time we have. So this one comes from Sanya from Germany. What is the most effective customer engagement strategies during this time? Mimi, do you have a thought on this?
Oh, that's such a big question. Look, I think this sounds like a bit of a cop-out, but it just totally depends on your industry and what you're trying to do. You know, if you're in the travel industry, probably one of your most effective mediums is going to be mechanics that build trust, because, you know, we need that now. And I work a lot with the travel industry. And if we're going to get people to travel again and you're going to get business to come back into you, there's a, you know, a huge trust gap that you need to look at. You know, maybe if you're in fashion or beauty, frequency is going to be very important around engagement. So the frequency of content, keeping people up to date, maybe looking at new ways of using old tools, as it were. So yeah, I think it very much depends on the category you're in, but understanding your consumers and really kind of knowing what they need is going to be the core to all of those decisions. So working out what is that frequency and what is the content that works best. I mean, there's this thing out there that says video content is the be all and end all, but for sure it isn't always. So yeah, really working out what your consumers need in your category. And again, Christina talked earlier about some of her content maybe being recipes for easy lunches and that type of thing. Understanding what her audience needed and adapting your mechanics to them is probably the best answer you can give around that, I would think.
I think that's great and a really nice summary there. And perhaps the addition that I would make is around thinking about whether it becomes organic or inorganic growth around some of those social media channels, and actually being clever and smarter with your organic growth could be a good way to save budget too, whilst you grow your communities in this area.
Yeah,
that's great.
absolutely.
Moving on to the next question from Austin from Campaign ME UAE. So I've heard a lot of clients are pulling their PR and agency duties in-house. Is that a sound strategy? Or will it be harder to scale up after the crisis with stretched internal teams and diminished agency capabilities? I'm going to go to someone in-house. Sudhir, what's your thought?
I don't think so. I think that you could renegotiate with an agency, but I don't think taking things in-house, because I think at this time, this is a great time to engage with people. And the amount of PR, for instance, we've got for our new initiatives, our virtual initiatives, have been far more than a lot of the PR we got during the pre-COVID era. And we also know that it wouldn't have happened if we had kept everything in-house, because these strategies of working with agencies pay fruit because they are the experts in many ways. So this goes back to my previous point that shutting doors down and not engaging with customers is definitely the wrong strategy, because you're just not in the consideration set with customers. B, when things come back, you are probably last. You will be the last to recover and see any results.
Great. Well, that's a resounding. We should be careful about how the in-house versus outsource strategy we take at this time. Thank you very much, Sudhir, for that. I've got another question here from Raj from the UAE. He says that COVID-19 has forced brands to generate a lot of short digital content to get their message out. What tools and materials proved most effective in being able to get your messages out there? I want to go to Christina and see if there's any insights that you can bring to the table on this area around tools and techniques to get your message out.
Yeah, so one of the things that's been sort of great about this is that because we don't have any clients at the moment, we can kind of put aside some of the things that we do for them and try new things. So we've been doing Instagram Lives, which we've been having a lot of fun with, and they've had a pretty good response. And we've been doing a lot of online recipes as well. So video and Instagram Live.
That sounds great. Well, thanks very much. And that's some really tangible things that you can do to be able to kind of get that reach.
Fun.
Thank you, Dan. Absolutely. Great. Okay, so I've got two more questions to ask. So the first one goes out to Paul. So the advertising business took 4 years to recover from the 2008 recession. With analytics predicting a deeper recession, what can marketers and advertisers be prepared for in the recovery? And that's from Riju from India.
I think this is a quite a relevant question given the shortness of the cycles that we're experiencing now. To be quite frank with you, again, it's not one shoe fits all. It all depends what organizations are we talking about, which sectors, which geographies. But again, I would like to reiterate, the smart money is going to be on the top line. So anything to do with revenue growth should be actually experiencing an upward trend. So I'm quite confident about the prospects of the marketing.
That sounds great. Thank you there, Paul. And it's great to hear the investing in the top line will work wonders. So I think that's a really good sort of pointer to hang on there. And my final question goes out to David, and this is from Richard from Spain. I've been asked to put ads not alongside COVID advertising due to the negativity that could be perceived. But am I missing out on eyeballs and potential engagement? What's your take?
I think you've got to be very wary about what your message is in terms of advertising alongside anything that is COVID-19 led. I think if you're value driven, you're talking about your product in a meaningful way, consumers will buy into it. I think it's about how you tell a story, a compelling story of what your product is. And consumers are, they're smart enough, they get it, they'll understand it. It's on every news channel, everyone's talking about it. We obviously, I'm part of Tribe Global as well, and we've got agencies all over the world. We've got Madrid and Portugal as an example. We talk constantly about how brands globally are talking, and I think it's really about not a transformation, but fine-tuning your conversation.
Great. Well, thank you very much for that, David, and totally concur. Guys, that's all the questions or time for questions that we have. We're running out of time. It's just been such a fascinating and interesting conversation. I suspect we could do this for a long time still to come. But I mean, I think we've covered so much ground in this 1 hour. Just one final one-liner from each of the panelists here today. So in 1 year's time, 365 days, where would you like to see yourselves? Sudhir, what's your one line?
Innovating, preparing, and succeeding in the new world that we find ourselves in.
Great. Innovation and being prepared. Thank you. Christina.
I think we'll be at the center of a stronger and more community-minded sort of business ecosystem that takes the views of all our stakeholders into account.
I love it. So community at the heart of business moving forward. Thank you. Mimi?
I would like to think that we have a healthier and stronger wellness culture within our organizations with people that are a little bit more balanced and a little bit more cared for while still achieving profit, while still growing their businesses.
Fantastic. So looking after your people and putting them at the center of the organization and wellness. Thank you. David?
Knowing the culture of my team, I think they would be pushing on inventing the disruption of tomorrow, really thinking in a holistic approach and acting digitally, essentially.
Great. A digital first type of approach.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Paul, your final thought.
The center of the global gravity is moving east. So one of the priorities for our organization is new geographies. So definitely moving east.
Great. New geographies, diversification, critical there. Thank you very much. Such a pleasure to be talking to all of you this afternoon or morning or night, wherever everyone may be in the world. I guess it's certainly a sign of the times. I think we've covered some amazing ground here. I mean, all the way from looking at take this time to take a step back. I think that was kind of a critical point that came out, to be able to look at some of the key future skills and digital skills. A lot of thoughts around where the future could be around AI and AR, and in particular thinking about both in-house experiences as well as what could happen in a more brave sort of world. I think from reaching out, people are overwhelmingly saying that this is the time now to support your customers, to reach out to them, to foster new relationships and foster different types of relationships with them as well, moving from perhaps a more fixed-based approach to a more variable-based approach and being more innovative with the overarching business models that we are deploying and seeing for the future. And then the final point, being empathetic and thinking very much about the wellness of people at the moment, looking after them, but still being able to have businesses that are going to be thriving in the future. So I hope I've summarized that, some of the key themes that have come out from this last hour. Again, I just want to thank all our panelists and all our viewers here today for taking the time, for actually engaging in the polls as well. So as mentioned previously, this is the first in a series of marketing webinars by Marketing Mania. So do look out for others in the series. And of course, stay tuned for the November event that's going to take place as well, where I'll be hosting a couple of sessions. And finally, the last thing from me is I just want to thank all the frontline workers for the fight that they are putting up at the moment against COVID-19. We really do appreciate what you are doing. So on that note, I just want to say thank you once again to everybody, and back to Pawan for closing remarks.
Wow, what a session. Thanks, Richie. I hope you've all found today's session as engaging, informative, and thought-provoking as I have. I would like to, on behalf of Dubai World Trade Center, thank our moderator and panelists for taking the time to share their expert knowledge and in-depth insights. We have covered pertinent topics and highlighted current and future challenges and opportunities for the marketing world as we know it. What is clear is that while challenges clearly remain, the passion and determination of everybody here today shows we will come out of this situation stronger, more efficient, and resilient. Stay in touch, stay connected, and look forward to seeing you again in a few weeks' time for the next in our series of webinars. Stay safe. Thank you guys. Goodbye.